Welcome to Momentum for Change, Voices of the Missouri Movement. This is a monthly podcast produced by your coalition, and I am your host, Nora Mosby, a member services specialist at the Missouri Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. We hope that you enjoyed this conversation coming to you directly from Voices of the Missouri Movement. Some episodes of Momentum for Change have conversations that include content and descriptions of domestic and sexual violence, which may be alarming or activating for some listeners. Please take care and visit the MOCADSV website or call our office to connect with supportive services. This is Nora Mosby, and I'd like to welcome you to a new episode of Momentum for Change. We certainly appreciate you joining us today because we have a great episode planned for you. I am joined by Jessi Bixler. Jessi is many things. Jessi is a mother. She is a wife. She's a sister, a daughter, a friend, an entrepreneur, an advocate, and a survivor of sexual violence. Jessi is also a published author, and she has recently published a book called The Stories We Share: How One Sexual Assault Ripples Through a Family and Their Fight for Healing. Excuse me, it's actually called The Story We Share, singular. This is a poignant and powerful book, and Jessi talks about the way that trauma has impacted many facets of her life, including her relationships, her process of moving forward, and what healing and justice has looked like for herself and her family. Jessi, I am so thrilled to have you on the podcast today. I cannot wait to talk about this very important book, The Story We Share. And I just thank you for writing it, and thank you so much for joining me to talk about it.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, absolutely. Can you just introduce yourself to our listeners and let us know a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So my name is Jessi Bixler. As Nora mentioned, I just published my debut memoir called The Story We Share, and that was in November. The timing was very intentional because, as Nora mentioned, I was sexually assaulted about 12 years ago, and it was my daughter's birthday, and her birthday is in November. So, like I said, it was very strategic to release during that month. I also, in my day job, I do marketing. I have a digital marketing company here in Kansas City, Bixler Consulting. So we help small businesses and startups with websites, online marketing, things like that. I'm married to Chad, and we have two kiddos, two teenagers, a 16-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl. So we are in the throes of it.
You are, and I'm so glad you pointed out the reason for why you released the book in November. That all adds up and makes so much sense, and it makes it just very meaningful to know that. So I'm really glad you shared that little nugget of information. In addition to all of those things that you do, you've also been very involved in the anti-violence advocacy movement in Kansas City. Can you talk a little bit about your work with that locally?
Yep, absolutely. So when I first moved to Kansas City in 2005, the company I was working for, the leader of that company was involved with an organization called MOCADSV, which is the Metropolitan Organization Countering Sexual Assault, which I'm sure many people are extremely familiar with. And I didn't really know, I was new to the city, didn't really know much about the organization at that time. Fast forward a few years to 2013 when I found myself in the hospital, and a MOCADSV advocate showed up while I was receiving the rape exam. And so I met a MOCADSV advocate and hadn't heard of MOCADSV or needed their services in between that time. And then I actually didn't use MOCADSV services. I opted to send the advocate away. I think at the time my brain was still kind of processing, and we can come back to that later. But again, took a couple years to process what had happened, and then decided to get back involved with MOCADSV as just kind of maybe partly a way of healing, but also my attempt to maybe give back. So I have now officially been on the board of directors for 8 years. years. I'm finishing either my eighth or ninth year. I lose track. So I'm the immediate past board chair. So I'll finish up at the end of this year, and unfortunately will no longer be a board member, but I'll still be involved heavily with MOCSA, which is, fun fact, the largest rape crisis center in the nation. So just celebrated 50 years of advocacy and service in the Kansas City area. So I'm so proud to be a part of that organization.
Yes, happy anniversary, Moxa. Thank you so much for your leadership there, Jessi. That's wonderful. Um, and as we're starting our conversation about your book, I just want to recognize that it's a really unique book. It's really special. It's really unique. It's very powerful. It is a collection of stories. It is one full story, your story. And then it's also a collection of essays. So how do you describe the book? Do you have like a stump speech for how you talk about the book?
Yeah, I think the way I usually describe it to people is it is still kind of like a chronological account of, starting with my daughter's birthday and the rape, the sexual assault. That it's unique in the fact, though, that it includes multiple perspectives of secondary survivors. So that of my husband, my parents, my brother, friends. Um, and I think it's unique in the fact that it's their exact words. So it's, a series of interviews that I had with them, and the way that they're placed in kind of the chronological order of the book is important because it also there's some symbolism there with a trauma survivor's memories and recollection of things. So you'll see kind of my account of certain events of the sexual assault, and then maybe an abrupt stop, and then my husband might come in and share his parts of the story or his vantage point, carrying us along, again, chronological in that timeline. Same with my parents too. So I think it was important to me to include their perspectives because secondary survivors are often overlooked. But additionally, I liked the symbolism of the fractured memories of survivors. I think if you're not in the trauma service space, you wouldn't pick up on that. But I think most people will, that have any sort of understanding of working with survivors.
Yeah, I definitely picked up on that too and took it away is that this really highlights the impact that the assault had on you, but also everybody involved, including your support system, secondary survivors. But very interestingly, also um, nurses, law enforcement, people who were professionals helping you. It is so multifaceted, and you drew in so many perspectives. I just thought that made it a very compelling and powerful way to tell your story. And I so appreciate all the perspectives that you brought in, and think that so many survivors, advocates will appreciate just how complex you tell your story. And this is really, I think, a book for everyone. I was like, this is a book for people who are working in the field, people who want to learn more about advocacy. It's for survivors. It's just a book for everyone.
Right. And I think that's the other, like, that was a big thing that I wanted to make sure to get across. Like, I knew I couldn't accomplish everything, but I wanted to make sure that even folks who either are not survivors or not in advocacy don't know someone that was sexually assaulted. While the theme is based around the sexual assault, I think to your point there, and my hope was to convey that there are things and learning lessons that you can extrapolate from this story, whether or not, you've been involved with a rape. You could apply these kind of things that you learn to supporting loved ones who've been in an accident, who've experienced divorce or grief. So I think that was really important and kind of, I guess, an underlying theme I hoped got across to readers.
It absolutely did. I'd also like to talk about the title of the book because I'm sure you put a lot of thought into it, and I love where you landed. The story we share really talks about the story we share as individuals, but also in another sense can be interpreted as like the stories we have in common with other people. So, what was your thinking behind that, and how did you land on the story we share?
That's exactly it. Kind of like what I said earlier about not being limited to just sexual assault and rape, but just to, the nod to the fact that there's so many things in our lives that aren't just limited to us or, traumatic, grief-stricken events don't just stop with us. They have these ripple effects on those around us and those that love us. And then, the ripple effect line is also a little bit of a nod to my happy place, which is the beach, which you can see on the cover of the book. And I talk a little bit about that kind of imagery as well. So it all kind of worked out. It worked out very, very beautifully.
I agree. I think it's such a poignant title, and really captures the essence of the book perfectly. Um, and so the book begins on the morning of the sexual assault when you are getting ready for your daughter's birthday party, and then it unfolds really just interestingly over the course of many years about all of the things that kind of follow this event and the many layers of how people are impacted. And so, of course, there's too much to cover in our conversation today. People are just going to have to buy the book and read it for themselves, and I could not recommend it more. But what would you say about your experience and how you decided to integrate different events that that happened following your experience of sexual assault?
So I am very much a list person. I like to see everything in order. I like to have a list to be able to check off, and the imprint of my book is the next thing press. So I was very focused after the assault on just doing the next thing. And so, it really just started off with after giving the police report and the detective, when I went to the police station a couple days later, she tore a piece of paper off of, out of a notebook and gave me a list of things to do. And it's kind of crazy how it started with that list of things to do, and after that, the list just kind of kept on building. Like, okay, we got to go do this, we got to go get new bed sheets, we have to, um, go talk to the prosecutor, we have to make sure this is happening. So um, it I think it kind of helped my sanity a little bit to have that, mental list of what to do next, being able to check it off. But I think it also sometimes um, had some negative effects for me, like in hindsight, being able to recognize that, not in the time, but because I am very like list organized, check it off the list. When things didn't work out according to that list, like, okay, if I just check it off, then things will be good. There's a number of times where just because I checked it off the list didn't mean that things progressed in quote unquote the order it should. And so that's a really hard thing as a survivor, kind of living in the throes of it, to grapple with. Like, but I did what I was supposed to. I checked it off my list. So I don't understand how this, if this then that, how that's not working out. So yeah, so I really just kept trying to do the next thing. I certainly don't have all the answers, and certainly don't have the prescription of, this is how you do it, but I just kind of did what was next on my list.
Yeah. And I think the way you tell the story um, chronologically is really helpful to people who are wanting to understand kind of maybe the pathway that survivors go through, and maybe even consider some additional options of support
Yeah.
available to themselves or to loved ones or other survivors. So there is just an abundance of insight in your book. You have so many great perspectives that you shine a light on. And so I'm just wondering, like, what are some key takeaways that you're hoping that people leave reading the book with? There's so many, but
Yeah.
are any key takeaways that you'd like to mention here?
I think one of the big ones that comes to mind is finding a trusted person. So I am so fortunate that my person was my husband. He is extremely patient. He's very present. He's extremely kind, and obviously he had never been through anything like this before, but he handled it so well. I think people reading it will just be shocked with how I mean, he really did everything right, at least for me, for what I needed. So I think that was key, having that safe space when I didn't know how to take care of myself. And in that kind of same thread, one of the things I checked off on my list was finding a therapist. And I was super fortunate to find someone right off the bat. She was recommended to me by my primary care physician, and I didn't have to interview everybody else. And I recognize that that's not often how the case, and that doesn't work for everybody. But she was certainly an anchor in trauma survival. So I saw her frequently, pretty regularly early on, and then really up until she passed away last July. So I think those are, again, finding your trusted people. Both of them were my trusted people, and she's helped me develop the tools to take care of myself and kind of release a lot of that burden from my husband.
Yes. And I have to say, like, as I was reading both of them, or chapters from both of them, I was so touched because just their kindness, their brilliance was very, very apparent. And the support that they were able to provide to you was truly inspiring. They have some incredible ideas. It definitely just warmed my heart. And I have to say, with your therapist, there was some moments where I just couldn't believe her brilliance. I thought she had great ideas, great insight, especially when talking about trauma. But oof, she was also pretty hilarious. Like there was a
Oh my
couple of
gosh.
moments where I laughed out loud.
Yeah, like she had a couple of very mic drop moments, I'll say, which were like, I mean, I even living through the story and then going through the process of writing it, I even caught myself, writing and being like, yeah, that's right, Susan.
Yes, me too. I was like, oh my gosh, she said that. That is hilarious. Like laugh out loud moments. It was just
Yeah,
really
totally.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the way that you include all of these different elements just brings about the humanity of like, sure, we're dealing with this trauma, these really hard things, but there's also humor and life goes on. And sometimes you do just have to laugh or find the humor in things. And your book captures that perfectly.
Thank you.
As I was reflecting on that, I was just wondering, do you have a favorite section of the book or a favorite maybe chapter that you included or even just a favorite passage? Because there's so many great ones.
Gosh, I think, I think I would, without spoiling, I don't think I'm going to share the Susan mic drop moment, because it's so good, and I think it would be a disservice to someone listening that ultimately reads the book. But I think, that it is a good one. It would be my favorite. So the honest answer would be that one. I won't share that story though. I think the other moment that I can think of is just so, kind of taking a step back, when we originally started talking about the multiple perspectives, and you mentioned, having my therapist, lawyers, the nurses in there. I think that was additionally important because it captured the whole story, but also it alleviated the need to include so much clinical jargon. There's, of course, like we can go and research statistics on rape and sexual assault and kind of, I'll say, like prove our point. And I mean, there's an abundance of that. And I did actually grapple with like how much, quotes and support and things like that do we include? And ultimately, I didn't feel like we needed too much of that because their words, as experts in their field, were doing that. And there is some support in the book. Um, but so I think, just kind of like that perspective of that, but also I don't think people really understand disassociation. So that would probably be my second, I'll say, favorite part is I tend to be a very like visual person, but I'm also like tactile, like all my senses, smells, touch, everything like that. Um, and so there is, I think, maybe a chapter or two where I do go into what dissociation is. And I'm thankful to Susan, my therapist, to help me understand that because I also, that was key for me in healing is like I need to understand what I'm feeling so I know when I'm feeling it, what I need to do. So for me, I would describe that as kind of floating feelings or like out of body looking down. So I needed to ground myself. Maybe it's like grabbing my, the arms of my chairs or, um, you know, I tend to like play with my fingers so that, I can tell like when I'm doing that, I'm feeling something inside my body. So the dissociation term feels clinical, but I liked the way that the chapters made it like normalized it. And I think that's one of those like transferable skills maybe from other types of trauma.
Yes. And I could not agree with you more. I do think that we just need a deeper and maybe more just practical and hands-on understanding of disassociation. And your book really does that perfectly. So for people out there looking for that in particular, I recommend the story we share. It's excellent. You mentioned earlier that a MOCADSV advocate did respond to the emergency room when you went to the hospital, um, and that you chose like not to have an advocate at that time, which you certainly understand. You just, that was a choice and what was best for you at that time. Um, but you have since become very involved in advocacy organizations and are very supportive of advocates. So I was wondering kind of if you want to speak more to the role of community-based advocates and what impact do you think that they can have on a survivor's experience?
Absolutely. For me, a little more context about why I sent the advocate away, or I shouldn't say sent them away. I guess I declined their services. At that time, I believed that I was in denial, even though I was in the hospital and in the middle of an exam with the same nurse when the advocate showed up. I was still in denial. I think in my fractured brain, that having the advocate there made it real. So I, I I couldn't have her there because I don't think that my brain really comprehended what was happening. Um, and at that time, well, I'm fortunate now, 12 years later, Moxa has grown and just the community of sexual violence, in our area, that just the knowing the advocacy has grown so much too. So I'm so thankful. But for me, I declined services, and that means I was alone throughout the whole process. So going and meeting with the prosecutor, we didn't know what we were doing. My husband and I had never been involved in, courts or the legal system. So we didn't have anyone there. And again, going back to how things have changed, those are services that Moxa offers, all free of charge. They have legal advocacy. They have advocates to show up at every stage of the process that you might go through and help to educate individuals. I think just seeing the services grow over those 12 years has been truly an incredible thing to watch. So I'm so thankful for that. Yeah, I think, yeah, I don't, sometimes I'm in awe of the work that organizations like Moxa offer to the community. Um, Again, for me, I had already had a therapist, so again, Moxa and other. There's of course I keep saying Moxa because that's what I'm involved in, but and there's other services around the Kansas City area and surrounding areas. But I had already had a therapist, but Moxa offers counseling services, again, free of charge, no matter what stage of trauma you're in, whether it's you're in crisis or it's 10 years from now. So I'm so thankful for that, and that we have people have resources, and Moxa will also talk to the secondary survivors too, which again, there's not as many resources and not as much known about that. So I think that is super, super important, and I would love to see more people take advantage of that.
Yes, I could not agree more. I think another thing that your book does really well is show the healing process, because it does kind of span many years after the assault. And so you can kind of see the bumps in the road and what works and maybe what wasn't so helpful, as you try different strategies for healing. You mentioned therapy being really helpful, but I wonder if there's anything else you would say about what was helpful, anything large or small, that you found as a helpful strategy as you were moving forward in healing.
Yes. Another thing that was helpful is more of the mind body connection, like the somatic therapies. So for me, that was yoga. I did yoga very regularly before the assault, and I jumped back into my regular hot yoga class a week later, and man, it was a disaster. It was, hyperventilating on the mat and feeling things, and it was, 100 and some degrees in there. So I was really, I was really going through some things, but I started to realize how helpful that could be for me. So much that I ended up becoming yoga certified and taught classes for a number of years. So I am a huge proponent of yoga. Susan was my therapist, and that was another thing that she really kind of stressed to me during therapy, is making sure to get it out of your body. So whether it's yoga, or a lot of times I was feeling a lot of anger. So it was like, okay, how do we get it out? Go punch something. You live on some land. Go take a bat out. And do you have an old computer? Like, show that computer who's boss, and let it have it. So I think that is something that I was very helpful for me. And I think it's important. Again, there's tons of studies that show that trauma, rape, and sexual assault survivors end up having a lot of um, internal medical, a lot of gut issues, heart conditions, things like that, because that trauma is stored in the body. So I think being able, taking words from Susan, but being able to get it out in whatever way makes sense for you, I think is really important.
Yes, yes, yes. I love that. And I think you really, in telling your story, identify kind of unconventional or maybe outside of the box strategies, big and small. Um, and so I really appreciated just you talking about all these different approaches to healing that were helpful as you were moving forward. So glad you brought those into this book as well.
I think there's a lot of trial and error. And I think that's important for people to understand, is that it's okay if you try yoga and you're like, this is not for me. I don't feel right. Like, recognizing this doesn't feel right in my body, or, maybe you don't want to go hit an old computer, or whatever it is. So I think, like, being okay with trying things, and maybe they don't work, but still trying continuing to find what that thing is for you. I think that's really important.
Yeah, it's a practice, not a one and done kind of event, right? So, what I really appreciate about this book also is that it does address secondary victims, something that I think there's such a need to address. And so you talk about secondary victims by collecting their stories and featuring chapters from different people that you interacted with throughout your healing process, including people that are very close and professionals as well. And so I was just wondering, like, as you were having these conversations and collecting these just different perspectives, is there any surprises or anything that you learned from other people or from these conversations?
I learned that all but one person, which was my mom, all but one person sought help for themselves. So whether it was a therapist or an employee assistance program, a counselor, anything like that. My mom was the only person who reached out. And unfortunately, she had a poor experience, which unlike my experience. So she only went the one time because it was too difficult for her. And so there's no fault, I don't fault her or anyone else in the book, family and friends, because again, they were still kind of working through like, well, this didn't happen to me. If I go see someone, they're wrestling with their own concerns. Like if I see someone, that doesn't feel right because I should be taking care of Jessi. She like it happened to her. And if anything, like maybe I should support Chad as, her husband and partner. But they kind of like minimalized their own feelings and processing of what happened to me. I mean, my parents were in the home. My dad was the one that took me to the hospital. So like there's so much that uh, um they didn't process and they haven't. And so I think a lot about too like why that was so important is, to be having these conversations now. And so my hope is that they will, should they need to, and if they don't, then that's their own journey. So yeah, so just learning that it made me sad that they didn't have that support system that I did all those years ago.
Yeah, I think sometimes there is a level of maybe guilt where secondary victims feel like there's something they could have done to prevent it, which is absolutely not the case
Right.
because they're not the ones who made that choice to commit an act of violence. And yet it's just human nature, I think, to sometimes blame yourself. And that's not okay. Like, just as it's not okay for victims to blame themselves for what happened, it's not okay for secondary victims to blame themselves because it wasn't their fault.
Yeah, I think there's also an element of I don't think people often talk about like the shock factor too. So I think, a lot of people say like, oh, if I was in that situation, I would have ran, fought, beat him up, shot it, whatever, done all of these things. Like I would have statements. And honest, I've been guilty of that too. There's so many like movies and our culture teaches us like this is what you should do in these situations. But speaking
Right.
firsthand, and you'll be able to read multiple perspectives. Not one person acted as they would think that they said they would have before having been in that situation. Because I don't think people realize too that you you don't have control. Like I didn't have control with how I reacted. Your brain, your nervous system, all of that takes over. So I think that's another hard thing too, is like when you put yourself out there, you still have those people that are like, well, why didn't you do this? I'm so mad at you because of XYZ. Um, so I think that's another thing that I would say would be important for people to understand is maybe, hopefully we can all be better about not passing judgment and making assumptions and understanding that a lot of times these responses are out of our control.
Yeah, absolutely. Another really unique element of your book is that you talk about parenting through recovery and parenting through the healing process, which I think is a very important perspective because so many survivors who have children are trying to navigate how to be parents and support their kids and take care of their kids while they are going through um, the the difficulties of experiencing trauma and moving forward and healing. You talk about it and give such great examples. Some of the most like heartfelt moments of the book are when you talk about interactions that you had with your kids. Is there anything you would like to say about your parenting experience through trauma?
I wish that I had more answers. um, Being a parent is hard in itself, and being a parent when you can't really take care of yourself is even harder. It's unimaginable. Um, and I was just talking with my son about I had written an article and he was reading it and we were chatting about it. And the article was actually about how my daughter likes to watch baby videos of herself. And while it's fun to go back and look at those videos, it's also really hard because I don't remember a lot of those videos. So it's like this weird dynamic for me to be able to see myself interacting with my kids, or even sometimes me not even being in the video and just watching my kids do normal things and be happy and play and be silly. And I was either not there or not present. So it's hard because I love watching those videos, but I also am mad because I'll never get those memories back. So I think as my kids have gotten older, I've been fortunate to have some difficult conversations with them. So they both know what happened to mom. They both know about the book, obviously age appropriate. And so we continue to have conversations around that. And I think there's a lot of things that we're learning that were kind of out of our control. They're almost like, I hate to keep using the word ripples, but kind of like the drafting effects of what happened. My daughter was 1 and she doesn't remember anything, but because mom was acting a certain way, there's things that we're seeing with her that we kind of wonder like how much of that is absorbed inadvertently, just based on my behavior at that time. So it is hard. I'm thankful that a lot of times my husband was mom and dad, and I'm thankful that we had family that jumped in and did a lot of those things when we couldn't. Um, so I don't know that I did it right all of those years. Now that they're older and now that I'll say I'm healthier, it's maybe not making up for lost time, but trying to just be more communicative and have grace for myself and really ask grace from them as well.
I love that. And just from the stories you told in your book and examples you provided, I could definitely imagine how you're raising two just mighty advocates for social change and who will definitely have their own powerful impact on the world. So hats off to you for that as well. So I think one really important thing about including these perspectives from secondary victims is you see the impact it has on your relationships, on your marriage, on your relationship with your brother and your parents, but also on friendships. So I wonder if you have any thoughts about the impact that trauma has on specifically relationships and anything that works well for rebuilding those relationships or repairing any damage that could happen as you are hurting and in pain.
Um, I think that going through the exercise of interviewing friends and family for the book was so therapeutic because there were some one friend in particular who she's my best friend for coming up on 25 years now. And I talk about this in the book, but she's my rainbows and butterfly friend. She's always happy. She brings the joy to any situation. And I took a long time to tell her what happened to me because I didn't know much at that time, but I knew that I I couldn't, rainbow and butterflies over what had happened to me. And so, I shared with her like, hey, I didn't tell you this because I couldn't be happy and like, it'll be okay, you'll get through that. That's not what I needed at the time. And we got off the phone after that. And for so many years, I thought that I hurt her because I said I like you couldn't be the friend that I needed is essentially what I was telling her at that time. And so being able to talk with her again about that time, and she remembered so clearly. I was thankful that she was like, I wasn't hurt. That's me. That's who I am, and I love that about her. So I had carried that for so long, and that guilt of hurting her. So we were fine through the years, and she never brought it up. We didn't really talk about it because she didn't want to rock the boat or didn't want to upset me, and I totally understand that. And it's almost like again, going through these interviews, that weight was lifted off of me, but it also gave a lot of friends and family like permission to ask about it more often. They didn't ask about it for so many years for the same reasons. They didn't want to rock the boat. They didn't want to upset me. They weren't sure if I'd, fly off the handle. So it felt like, okay, like you're putting this out in the world, like it feels like I have permission to ask how you're doing, how it's going. And so I think that conversation piece, that's a big thing for me in our family unit as a mom, as a wife, as a friend, is I want to be always communicating. Maybe, I could tone it back a little bit and, I don't have to overly communicate. So, we're still working and evolving.
I think that's so important to hear because sometimes people don't want to ask survivors about what happened or bring it up again because they don't want to re-traumatize somebody. But then what ends up happening is that it never gets talked about again, and it can lead to some misunderstandings
Right.
of what's
Isolation,
actually
feelings of
going on.
isolation. Yeah.
No, absolutely. So maybe you don't have to write a book to have these conversations, although you did. But maybe for survivors out there who have feelings, or maybe there's some miscommunication or misunderstandings, you can have these conversations, as you're comfortable, and potentially could clear up some
Yeah.
misunderstandings.
And they're different types of conversations too, right? Like they're conversations of well-being and they come from a place of love. And you mentioned re-traumatization, and that's totally different. Those are different conversations than re-traumatization when we're talking about it. When you have to give your police report, when you have to go, you get the rape kit performed and you go to the hospital, when you have to talk to a prosecutor, when you go through the legal system, all of these are re-traumatizations when you have to, retell your story over and over and over again. Those are totally different conversations. So I want to make sure, and I know most people that are listening like understand that differentiation because there's still a problem with re-traumatization when it comes to supporting a survivor in the throes of things.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. You mentioned law enforcement, and I just want to kind of talk about the fact that you reported it to police, you told your story to prosecutors, you went through the criminal justice process, and did, quote unquote, everything right, everything that a survivor should do in order to get justice through the criminal legal system. And yet you did not get that justice. So is there anything you would like to say about that process and the impact it had on you and your family?
Yeah, it was devastating. It was heartbreaking. That was probably the first time. I mean, it took the wind out of us. It left us. Uh, I mean, we were just stunned. So for context, we were told, hey, we just need to wait until the rape kit comes back, and then we're looking at either rape in the first degree or sexual assault in the second degree. I can't remember the exact um, specifics there. But then, when the rape kit was processed, and then we were told, oh, never, nope, we're not gonna move forward with this because we can't prove intent. And again, for my husband and I, never having been involved with any sort of legal system or anything like that, we were like, wait a second, what do you mean by intent? Um, what if we had video? What if we had a confession? What if we had all of these things? And we were repeatedly told that does not prove intent. And it's still something that is a fire and the driving force, I think, behind some of the advocacy work that we personally do. And um, so we ended up just having a conversation with a civil attorney and trying to understand what it would look like to go that route, and really just a, I don't know, more of like a sounding board, second opinion. Like, is this normal? Are we missing something? Did we do wrong? Did we do something wrong in the process? Um, and it was interesting because the prosecutor, and again, I learned so much too throughout the process too. Like, you see on TV, like, do you want to press charges? And the victim says, yes, I want to press charges. I learned that it's really not up to the victim or survivor at all. And so that's a really hard thing, when you have a crime where control is taken away from you and any sort of autonomy or choices are taken away from you, and you're told you have a choice to press charges, and then that's taken away from you again. It's so confusing, it's so devastating. And so anyway, so our civil attorney was like, no, I don't get this. I'm fueled and mad too. And so he ended up calling the prosecutor and was like, what the heck? Like, what happened here? And the prosecutor said, we have a policy in our office where we only prosecute cases that have a 97% chance or higher of winning, which is still just mind blowing. And so, like, those two things, that, proving intent and then prosecuting based on the chance of winning, it's just, I mean, that's why, all of the statistics and the numbers you can find out there, that's why they are what they are, which is horrible.
Yeah, it is mind blowing. I could not agree with you more. But as the story unfolds, you mentioned that you did move forward with a civil case. So is there anything you would say about that process, or maybe anything you would recommend to other survivors who are considering moving forward with a civil case?
Yes, so we did pursue civil. We were told from the beginning it's a very long, long process. I mean, plan on 8 years. And so we had our doubts, and my husband and I talked about it a lot, and what that would mean for us, for our family, monetarily pursuing that, with the chances that we might not win. We might uh, do all the right things and, have the rug pulled out from under us. So ultimately, we decided that, all we wanted was not to have this person not do this again. That's all I mean, so we wanted him to go to jail. We wanted him to be held accountable. Um, we were naive. We thought if we pursue civil suit, then maybe at least he could be on the sex offender list, which was not the case either. So we really had to wrestle with the ultimate um, outcome of a civil case, which is monetary compensation. And to be quite honest, Nora, it was tough, and it kind of felt a little icky, like, to be compensated financially for this horrible, violent crime that this person committed against us. And so our attorney, we had great conversations with our attorney. He was a trusted person in our lives, and he helped us um, understand the accountability that would be held against the perpetrator in this situation. But that's a really hard thing, and ultimately the civil suit did work out in our favor. So there was a judgment, a public judgment against this individual, which is again what we wanted because the ultimate goal is to prevent him from causing further harm. Um, so that's a good thing, but it's not for the faint of heart. And I recognize that it doesn't always turn out like it did in our case. And those are two things to really have to grapple with because it's not a guarantee. And so that's tough.
Yep. Yep. I'm so glad you spoke to that because I think one thing that you do so well is identify the complexities of healing and that so many of these issues are not black and white issues, that there's bad that comes with the good and good that comes with the bad. And so you got some of that accountability, but then maybe a little bit of that icky feeling as well.
Yeah.
And I think one thing also that you talk about is how you and your family changed as a result of this trauma, and that as much as it should have never happened, and there were so many difficulties that you all experienced, you are also a stronger person, and you are the person you are today in part because of this. So is there anything you would say about how the trauma maybe impacted your priorities in life, or just change, I don't want to say in a positive way, but maybe a little bit of that like post-traumatic growth situation, knowing that this should have never happened?
I think it gave me fuel maybe that I didn't know that I had. I think it changed my priorities. And I think for me, I'm a very faithful person. So I think I felt it building in my spirit over time. Um, and so from you asked about prioritization, I started my marketing company. It'll be 8 years ago in August, and that kind of spurred out of changing jobs multiple times and going back to work too soon and ultimately just taking a sabbatical and a time of rest and processing and asking questions and learning and talking to other people. So I think that's like the moment things started to change and my frame of reference started to change. What was important to me started to change. It was no longer climbing the corporate ladder and getting the next promotion and earning the next raise. Um, and so those things, while they're important, they were becoming less important. So seeing my kids get on the bus, being present, being able to say like, okay, I don't have those memories, but I'm going to make sure that I have, the other memories, like I'm going to start now. So I could feel that shift changing. um, and then I also feel like I sat on the idea for a book for a very long time, mostly just because it felt so heavy. It always felt like there's something wrong here. Does this feel like, heavy, that there's some substance to it? And um I didn't want to rush it. I was just like, well, I'll know when it's time, um and then I'll just kind of see what happens. And so my long-winded answer is from that point 8 years ago and starting to reprioritize what's important. So my family, my husband, my kids, and then also just understanding that the advocacy, like this message, it's bigger than me, it's bigger than you, it's a systemic problem. And luckily I have a pretty loud mouth and I can I'm fine. I feel like that's a gift, is that I have this strength and to be able to share my story. I have a good support system. I have people in my life that love me. So being able to serve others is another way that I know that things have shifted for me.
Yeah, I agree. Like you definitely, we are very lucky that you are loud about what happened in your story. So thank you for that. And you have so much strength, and you also have so much wisdom. And I just appreciate you moving forward and writing this book. Writing a book is something that not every survivor chooses to do. Um, and you did. And so, do you have any thoughts that you would like to share, maybe with other survivors who are considering writing a book or sharing their story in the written form or something like that?
Yeah, I think, it's funny. I always thought about the idea for a book, but I always joked that I was a terrible writer and I hated journaling. And Susan, my therapist, would, again, in the theme of getting it out of your body, she'd say, "Why don't you journal?" And I would try that and do positive affirmations. And honestly, they worked at the time and for what I needed them to do. So I think I would encourage people to find, again, kind of going back to like we talked before, like find different ways to creative outlets to get it out of your body. And whether someone else sees it or reads it or not, it's really not important. But being able to, one, get it out of your body. And there is something um, kind of incredible after, you put something on paper or even like a painting like you paint through some feelings of anger or happiness or sorrow and being able to be out of that space that you're in at that time and to come back and look at it and to see how you've grown and changed like it's pretty incredible and it's healing in of itself like seeing the growth that you're doing just through your own healing process if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can see maybe a little bit of validation there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I cannot recommend this book more. You already know I'm a huge fan of it. For listeners who are wanting to get their own copy of it, where can they find the story that we share?
Yeah, so it is on our website, thestoryweshare.com. We also have a weekly blog that we put out with just some shorter form content, just around kind of the same things of trauma we talked about, like the baby videos. So just, I guess, maybe like more of an online journal that could be more of a helpful resource to people. There's also resources on there for survivors or for secondary survivors, organizations like MOCSA and others in national and regional. But then also the book itself is available on Amazon or Barnes and Nobles and some of the regional libraries as well.
The Story We Share by Jessi Bixler. Check it out. It is just a fantastic book. You mentioned your blog. It is so good as well. I have caught a couple of your blog entries, and they're great. And there are just tons of resources on your website too. So please don't sleep on Jessi's website. It's great, and we'll include that in the show notes for our website, as well as a link onto where you can buy that book. So as we're wrapping up our conversation today, Jessi, is there anything that you want to say about what's next for the book or what's next for your advocacy in general?
Oh, I wish that I could. I am in a really interesting season of life right now where I'm um, just kind of at the risk of being redundant, just trying to be in the moment. So I think I still feel like what's the ripples from the book are still, you know, trickling out. And so my hope is that I'll continue to have more conversations with folks like yourself. I'll be able to work with larger scale audiences in the forms of events and things of that nature. So I hope that I can continue to have more conversations if what I have to say provides value to people and is helpful. And just finding other ways that I can serve survivors, secondary survivors, leadership communities. So I don't know what that looks like. I'm excited because I'm loving it. I hate to say that I'm having fun because it's a hard subject matter, but I love learning and there's still so much that I don't know. So I don't know. We'll see.
All right. Well, we will certainly keep an eye on that and stay tuned on your next with your next steps. Um, And yes, there's just so much value in your advocacy and this book. So I can't recommend it more. As we're ending our episode, do you have any final thoughts you want to share with the listeners today?
I would, if you're in need of someone to talk to, one of the things we talked about earlier in our conversation was having a trusted person. If you don't have a trusted person, I encourage you to reach out to Moxa if you're in the Kansas City area. If you're not, you can still reach out to Moxa and we can connect you with an organization or someone in your area. But I think they're just finding someone that can help steward you through whatever you're feeling, again, whether you're in crisis situation or you're many years removed. I couldn't promote Moxa enough, but really more so finding that trusted individual that can be there for you.
Yes, absolutely. That's such great advice. So thank you for that. And thank you for this excellent conversation, Jessi. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate the story we share. So
Thank you.
and thank you, listeners, so much for tuning in. We hope you join us next month for a new episode of Momentum for Change. Thank you for joining us. This has been a recorded conversation now available in both video and podcast formats. A video recording of this episode is available on the MOCADSV YouTube channel under the Momentum for Change playlist. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel in order to receive new episodes in your YouTube feed. You can also find all of our Momentum for Change episodes available to stream on Spotify or wherever you find your podcasts. Momentum for Change is a podcast produced by MOCADSV with post-production support provided by Tim Stillings and promotion by Adrian Maddox. Again, I am your host, Nora Mosby, and we appreciate you joining us for this episode. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you next month.